Suzy Urbaniak OAM. She is a geologist, an educator, WA's local hero, and a serious game changer when it comes to the world of STEM and education.
That's where my philosophy started 21 years ago.
Wow.
Recognising that science is doing, science is hands-on learning, science is about being creative.
That's phenomenal.
I know. I can confidently say when I finished my so-called classroom teaching in 2018, at that stage 58% of my alumni were female.
Wow.
Of 33% English second language and 10% First Nations.
Wow. Those are some pretty amazing stats.
Creating that awareness of, yes, we do need energy, we do need water, we do need metal, and that all comes from rock.
Yeah. What matters most to Suzy?
I live to work and work to live.
Yep.
Professionally, my biggest buzz is when wherever I go in WA now, I bump into an alumni.
Wow.
Personally,
What is one piece of advice you give your students that you hope they take away from your education?
Okay. Look through windows and walk through doors.
Wow. Welcome back to the Gold Room podcast. My name's Jazz Diab, and today I've stolen the keys for the podcast off Josh because I have someone truly amazing with me in the studio today, Suzy Urbaniak OAM. She is a geologist, an educator, WA's local hero, and a serious game changer when it comes to the world of STEM and education. Suzy, I'm really excited to have you here today.
Hi, Jazz. I'm excited myself. It's pretty amazing to be speaking to you. Another woman in STEM.
I know. It's amazing. We could start a tribe. So we always start this podcast with the life and the times. So can you tell me the story about Suzy?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm nearly 60, so there's a bit to go through. But essentially my love of the earth, my love of rocks all came, was out of my backyard in northwest Melbourne, where I grew up on the fringes of suburban Melbourne. So I had streams, creeks, whatever you want to call it, flowing over basalts with zeolites in it. So my love of that and my love of volcanoes and geology, geosciences and the earth all stem back to probably when I was about 4 or 5 years of age. So I was in pursuit of being a geologist and through my education, nothing was going to stop me from going into university except my English, which to this day I'm very traumatised by. Because back in Victoria, back in the early 80s, it was like if you failed English, didn't matter what other grades you got or scores you got, you didn't get into university. And I just thought this was just amazing. Like being English second language too, my ability to verbally communicate's okay, but getting everything down onto paper was always a bit of a hassle. So I was always borderline 49, 50, 51, and so I went into that exam thinking, this is going to determine my life. Because, you didn't have secondary, tertiary type entrances back then, it was either going to uni or not. So it was really important that I passed English, and fortuitously, is there such a word? I did. And
Perfect at English.
and then off to ANU in Canberra to study geology and, honours, and then off to Telfer, basically, from there.
Wow.
And I've been a sandgroper ever since. It was not part of the plan, so to speak, or I always had this pull to go back to the eastern states, but now I definitely can say that I'm no longer a Mexican, but a sandgroper. I'm very, very proud of being a part of Western Australia. So, I went to Telfer, had the best 5 years of my life. Honestly, the closed mining town community type stuff was just amazing. I'm still, some of my closest friends are from those days in my early 20s. And we have our Telfer reunions as such, and 35 years later, we're still really good mates. So it was a real amazing time of my life, and love the. Actually, I only left Telfer because I got sick of the blue skies.
Too blue.
Too blue. Yeah, there wasn't the variety or the diversity in the weather. But look, what a deposit, hey. Like, what an amazing great ore deposit that place was. I honestly loved working there. I loved my life as an exploration geologist. It was that everyone was so fixated on gold, but there were so many other elements there. And at that time, I didn't understand why they weren't interested in all the other metals that were in that area. But now I guess they do. And, they're expanding with their heavier on deposits. So, pretty amazing. I'm pretty sure I was the first one that drilled the first hole in that one with working with Mark Sexton, I think it was, the geophysicist. I'm pretty sure I drilled the first hole into that one. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And struck gold straight away.
Oh, wow.
After the Permian glacials, yeah. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then off to Kalgoorlie and had some fun there, working in different terrain. And then that's when, decided to become a mother at the age of 29. Had my 3 sons in 14 months.
Which I take my hat off to you, to have 3 little people in such a small space of time is hardcore.
Yeah, it was a bit of an eye-opener.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then my life took a turn with 319 months when I was left as a single parent.
Wow.
And, that was quite life-changing. And, I used to call it the well syndrome. It was about 8 years of trying to get out of the well, trying to find to who I was, what I was supposed to do, how I was supposed to manage it. Then obviously teaching was my only way out. As the mother, the mother and the father, like financial officer, everything. I was basically everything. So teaching was the only way that I could be there in the morning and be there in the afternoon after school.
Yeah, so the industry wasn't overly flexible and supportive for parents to return to work?
The gold price was $220 or $250 an ounce when all this happened. So it was, the saying out on the streets of Perth was, well, how do you find a geo? You hire a taxi. So there was no...
Wow.
Because they all became taxi drivers. It wasn't conducive environment back in the late 90s, early thousands for that. But, definitely there wasn't that flexibility either to do that. Especially I had no one here as well, my family. I didn't have any family here, so it wasn't that conducive.
Yeah, okay.
So I tried stock taking, I tried sales with Thermomix, I tried everything, and everything just didn't fit that. So I had to go back to uni and do my dip ed and become a teacher for the interim. It was just an interim.
Yeah. And look where it's taken you.
It was just an interim measure because I was going to go back onto those drill rigs and lick rocks after my twins finished high school. I was bound for that. I wanted to finish the career I started.
Yeah.
Which I still haven't.
Because you've been doing some pretty phenomenal things in the STEM teaching world.
Yes, which wasn't planned.
Yeah, right.
Which wasn't planned at all. Yeah.
So you'd briefly mentioned in your early life as a 4 or 5 year old loving volcanoes and loving rocks. Was there any influences in your family or anything else that drew you into that STEM world?
Absolutely not.
Wow.
I can't work it out. But I don't know my history because my grandparents were in the camps in Europe, in World War II in Germany. So much of my history beyond my grandparents, I don't know. So other than that, I don't know where it came from, where, this I wouldn't say force, but this love of science or this dominance as a woman in STEM. I have no idea where it came from.
You just loved it. I love that though, because that's how I think I got into STEM as well. I just am fascinated by how things work, and science explains it all, right?
Well, it does, like even to this day and for the last 21 years, I'm always about science in the world around us and science in everyday life. And science is not a belief. Science is about facts. Science is about the scientific process. Science is about questioning, it's about thinking. It's not textbooks, it's not worksheets. It's not about exams.
Yeah.
Science is about getting the best out of people and the best out of a diversity of people. And that's where my philosophy started 21 years ago.
Wow.
Recognising that science is doing. Science is hands-on learning. Science is about being creative, solving problems, making sense of data. Everything that I experienced as a geologist brought to me how defunct was what I did in education. What I learnt in education, to this day, I don't think really helped me being that person as a scientist, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, right. So let's dive a little bit more into that because geology, I don't know a lot about geology.
You don't know about rocks?
No, besides uranium creates some pretty amazing reactions.
Yeah.
My knowledge of geology is pretty light on. So can you explain to us, I guess, that practical geologist experience and how that linked to your education philosophies?
Oh, true. It was about exploring. It's about exploring and finding stuff, being curious and stripping everything back to your senses. So, I was in mine geology, but I really love brownfields and greenfields, going out there and, collecting the data, making sense of the data, hypothesising, all that science process that is really, really important to science. And through that, getting that buzz, that adrenaline rush where, you're right. When you hypothesise something and you estimate where something should be under the ground, we're using the data from up top and other drill holes and stuff. And, that was quite a buzz for me. I was drilling out at Grace. It's a tenement like southwest of Telfer. And I was drilling this, finding this copper gold, blah, blah, blah. And I was, you immerse yourself into the ground, into 3D space and visualising the drill holes and visualising the intercepts so that, if you didn't get something that you would actually, move those drill rigs. So it's, making those decisions, having the confidence, that self-confidence to make those decisions, knowing that you have faith in the data that you're working with and what you've collected. And so when I look back at my schooling from an all-girls school that didn't do physics because girls didn't do physics.
Oh, my God.
Yes, right.
That breaks my heart.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Luckily, I had a earth science educator that actually spurred me on. And my sports. I was right into sport, netball, which I still got gummy knees from.
I was about to say, how are your knees?
No, they're playing up at the moment. Old age is kicking in. So I had these two women that believed in me, I guess. But there was no physics. But again, the science was all about answering tests, doing tests. It wasn't about that true scientific, that process of not following a chocolate cake recipe. Like, this is your lab, now go and do it. That's chocolate cake recipe. Anyone can do that.
Yeah.
Follow instructions.
Yeah.
It's about that extra level of, I want to know the answer about this. And that's what I did as a geo, like looking at legacy data, manipulating legacy data, rotating the sphere, so to speak, and finding more gold. Now, that was a real buzz. That was actually my swan song.
Wow.
I rotated the so-called ore deposit about 25 degrees and then bang, 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 hit it.
That's phenomenal.
I know. That was my swan song around Kalgoorlie back in 95 or 94, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So.
Yeah. And so you briefly mentioned that after having kids, you had to transition your career into education. Yeah. What did that transition look like?
Having to go back to uni was a real pain. having to start at base level was a real pain with an ignorance of real world experience as well as STEM experience.
Yeah.
STEM was not a word back then, by the way. But here, there were people that were out of the industry. They were bringing real world experiences into the classroom, moving away from that traditional chalk and talk and all that traditional exam stuff. People that made connection with how learning connects to the real world. And so I had to start off on base level. I was a 38-year-old, I think I was, when I started in my education career. But, I had enough confidence, I suppose, in myself to do things differently, meet the expectations of what was required, but I did it differently. From the onset, my students were active learners. They were not passive learners. I've moved the desks. I danced on desks. I made them dance in the classroom. I got things happening where they were choosing their own, there was themes, their own investigations to do. So it was about having real scientists and real engineers in the classroom, working collaboratively in teams to do this work, to problem solve, to investigate a real world scenario and solution. So this was back in 04, 05.
Wow. That's super exciting because, like you say, that's what science is. It's hypothesising something and then go out and find the evidence to prove it or disprove it, right?
Yep.
And to be able to be given that opportunity in a classroom, which is normally sit behind your desk, write this, rote learn it.
Yep. No.
Which not every kid is good at.
No, and that's the whole thing about reducing inequalities because we all got different learning styles.
Yeah.
We've all got different capabilities, we've all got different talents, we've all got different interests, but together we complement each other. And that's that whole point of teamwork, that whole point of collaboration, that we're all working together to solve a problem. So having students in groups of 3 or 4 working together to solve a problem was how they brought their strengths, their interests and their capabilities together to deliver a great project. And that's when I got involved with the Petroleum Club of Western Australia, which is now the Energy Club of Western Australia, and how they wanted to promote the industry here in Western Australia. And so they had the Schools Information Program and I got involved in that. And then I could see straight away that that's similar to the work that I did as a geo. So got my teams together and we put everything into a thematic approach, into a hands-on approach. And we won a couple of state titles, and that was how I was evolving the learning model that started. It was not planned. It was not planned.
Wow.
It was called Geezer, then Geezer, and eventually Core, which is 10 years this year that it was officially mandated as core and accepted by the Education Department as a select entry program at Kent Street Senior High School, where all my educational groundwork was done. So it's 10 years since that was officially mandated and accepted, August 2015.
That's phenomenal, but I'm assuming there were some hurdles to get it to that point.
Oh, hurdles, roadblocks. There's this whole thing about this, I was brought up in an environment where you finish school and everything's quite linear thereafter. Yeah. And from the onset, my students, I said, no. It's constantly, around the corners, up and down, roadblocks and all that sort of stuff. And, I wore my heart on my sleeve, even with my students, making them aware of the roadblocks. But it was always for the students, by the students. So the students, year after year, when I was working with them, I took their feedback, took anything they said, anything that I experienced in terms of roadblocks and stuff like that. Took all that on board to help develop the learning model. Having said that, though, I have had amazing supporters in education. I've had at Kent Street Senior High School, amazing principals were behind me, amazing deputies were behind me to actually allow me to step outside the box and push those boundaries to make sure that science at Kent Street was a lot more engaging.
That's all right. That's amazing. I'm just in awe. I'm like, I wish I was a student at Kent Street High School. So something I'm also pretty passionate about is having more women in the STEM workforce. You are a woman, that was a geologist, that's now STEM educator. What has your experience been like? Have you been able to do the things you wanted to do? Have you been discriminated against? Because I know the industry has changed a lot, but I don't know. I'm not convinced it's completely changed for the better in some areas.
Well, it has in other areas changed for the better. Yeah. Having said that, like when I started as a geo, I didn't get any of that. I just fell into the groove of working in a team. I didn't experience any discrimination, any sexism against any of the work. I was just one of the team. At least I didn't feel it. It was when I became a mother. That's where it was the black and white with the working mother type stuff, and that's. Again, I suppose that was a turning point in my life. But yeah, I've navigated it through. And when I went into education, that was a big part of women in science, or women in, because as I said, STEM didn't exist. Yeah. There wasn't an acronym, but I think I was steaming, whatever you want to call it, well before STEM or STEAM became an acronym. But that was a big part of my focus too, was to make sure there was equity in the science classroom. And whether it's female or male, with science education, it's a matter of trust in the educator, and it's a matter of role modelling and being real. Yeah. And I think that's the edge that I had, was having had that experience in the real world, and I was able to bring it into the classroom to then demonstrate the connection between curriculum and the real world, and how what they were learning, how it applies to themselves, how it applies to their future careers, and an awareness of careers. I couldn't believe that when I went into education in a resources hotspot like Western Australia, how it was only 4 schools that were doing geology or mining, or whatever you want to call it, in Western Australia. This was early thousands. So, yeah, new kid on the block.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the same time, ESWL was starting. So there was ESWL's Earth Sciences Western Australia, which is Oz Earth Ed now. And so there was that starting to get that push. So I became a major supporter and major propeller, I suppose, of that push of earth science, geoscience education here in Western Australia, and to get more females into science and into geoscience. I can confidently say when I finished my so-called classroom teaching in 2018, at that stage 58% of my alumni were female.
Wow.
Of 33% English second language and 10% First Nations.
Wow. Those are some pretty amazing stats.
Yeah, and on Facebook this morning, a photo from 11 years ago popped up, and there were 5 exes, or alumni, Kent Street alumni, of which 4 of them were female and one fella, that were all on the geoscience pathway.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What an amazing legacy.
Yeah, it's
right.
and I maintain contact with a lot of the alumni, and some of them are now in their early 30s who are well advanced in senior positions within resource companies, major resource companies here in Western Australia, as superintendents and leaders, or resource leaders, or what have you. So I'm very, very proud of what they've achieved.
Wow. Oh, it's amazing when someone's passionate about something, how much it can roll on and influence others to do phenomenal things, to give them that trust, give them that motivation, educate them in a way that's useful, and look at them.
Well, that's what learning's about. Learning is not about sitting passively behind a desk in rows.
Yeah.
Learning is about nurturing. Learning is about, or teaching learning is about the development of intrapersonal skills, which is what the core learning model is based on. So even though it's science context, it's about self-development, self-confidence. It's about getting students to believe in their capabilities and their talents, and that what they have is something different and something that unique that can complement an overall task.
Yeah.
The traditional system is very inequitable in my eyes. This is just my perspective. in my eyes. It only demonstrates success according to an exam. Whereas you provide a safe environment for students to explore their own characters, their own capabilities. That's when you can see the best being brought out in them. And that's what effectively the core learning model was developed to do, using geoscience context, resources industry context. So to promote the resources industry as potential career paths by identifying through their educational journey what they're good at and then what careers can align with that. It's not about having a separate subject called careers. It's about growing that STEM within them as from year to year to year, so they understand how, as they grow, trusting the system, how they can then become part of the future industry.
Yeah, okay.
So, and that's particularly true with females.
Yeah.
With my female students. As I said, 33% of them English second language, and now they're leaders in their field. As geoscientists, did double degrees in finance, geoscience and what have you, giving them that confidence that, there's more to being a nurse or a teacher or a lawyer or a doctor. There are other possibilities out there that, that align with your capabilities and your interests and your talents. And so that's that whole idea. And I guess I didn't set out to be an advocate of the mining industry, I suppose. But I saw how deficit it was in terms of a resources hotspot in Western Australia. And I thought, well, something's got to change here. You've got to have homegrown talent.
Yeah, definitely. And if kids don't have role models at home that work in the industry, they just don't know the jobs exist, right?
No, they don't, no.
So that's quite phenomenal that the core learning model is this way to show them, hey, here are all the possibilities. Let's find your talents.
Yep.
And match it to the possibilities of careers. Like, that's pretty powerful.
Yep.
So I can tell by the way you talk that you clearly have a passion for STEM education. What drives that fire, and where do you see that taking you next?
Oh, wow. I really don't know what drives me. Other than to make a difference to kids' lives, so that whilst they're learning, they're realising there's a purpose for their learning.
Yeah.
And not something that they're going to say at the end of year 12, well, why did I go to school?
Just to get a piece of paper.
There's a purpose, and so that they're actually learning about themselves and learning about where they're going to drive themselves into the future. And that they become pilots of their own pathways.
Yeah.
And not be told, by a career counsellor or something, you've got to do this, this and this. Have that integral self-discipline to say, well, no, this is what I want to do and this is how I'm going to go about doing it. I remember one of my alumni coming up to me and saying, in his first year, he went on to WASM and he went into Kalgoorlie to do on the campus there, and he came to me and said, Urbie, that's my nickname from the students, Urbie, if I didn't do core, I wouldn't have had the confidence to go up to blah, blah, blah and ask him for vocational work, which he got.
Wow.
As a first year. Because they normally don't give vocational work or vacation work, whatever you want to call it, to first years. So he got it. So it was those skills. Where to next? I didn't realise that I was going to be part of the foundation 8 years ago, leave the classroom. But that's, again, two wonderful people who supported the idea and the notion, Christian Price, which I think the WA mining community knows well of, and Kate Driver, who I met over in Canberra, who was the Deputy Director of Questacon at that time. So the three of us got together and started the foundation to take the core learning model beyond the walls of Ken Street, to obviously promote the learning model, get more students engaged in the learning model. I went to a place where, even though the students were living in a mining town, they weren't totally aware of what was being mined.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where the narrative needs to change. And part of what we do is promote the importance of earth science education and its connection to industry careers. And not only do we work with the students, but we work with the educators. If we work with the educators, they empower their students more. So it's about also educator training in terms of how earth science learning fits into this whole model. And as you know, with everything that's going around with nuclear, with energy, with climate change, everyone needs to have the science.
Yeah.
And the real science and understanding of where it's at. You know, like 3/4 of the periodic table needs to be mined for electrification. That's a lot of metal. Mm-hmm. I was at the World Mining Congress 2 years ago, and essentially for 2050, we need 27 new Cadia-sized mines here for copper if we're going to gain net zero. That's what they said in the World Mining Congress in Brisbane. 27 size Cadias.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of people don't understand the critical minerals required for a lot of the future plans, and that involves a workforce that's having to actually get that out of the ground and process it. And some of that doesn't exist yet.
No. And I guess that's been the aim all along, I suppose, is that creating that awareness of, yes, we do need energy, we do need water, we do need metal, and that all comes from rock.
Yeah.
It all comes from rock. That's how crucial and critical this industry is. Yet we've got, in education, earth science is put down on the bottom run.
Well, I don't think it was even an option when I was at high school.
Yeah, and, you know, like if we're going to create or have a workforce that's geoscience literate to support the resources industry across the nation, not just here in Western Australia, we need to change a few things in this curriculum.
Yeah.
Which they were changing the curriculum 2 or 3 years ago. I got an Oz IMM onto it, MCA. You know, they were diluting earth science even further, and which they have. And fortunately here in Western Australia we're still keeping some parts of it quite strong. But and it's important to make sure that our future employees know where they're going to and what they're doing. Like all these metals are required for all these technologies.
Yeah.
All this technologies, all this automation, all this robotics going out into space, it all requires metals.
Yep. Yeah. It's not a belief. It's not ideological.
No.
It's science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there has to be important sustainable practices put into place to govern this. And we need our students aware of this, the importance of it, and not that it's a negative thing, that mining's a negative thing. Yeah, that's really hard, particularly when you speak to people on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's very hard for them to see that
Because they don't live and breathe.
they don't live, but it's not in the curriculum. It's not in the curriculum.
Yeah.
It's not in the curriculum, and it's not being taught. And that's where that's where the problem lies. Because if we're not exposing our primary kids and our secondary kids to it, year 10, 11, 12 is too late.
Yeah.
You know, there has to be that fascination. You know, the kids in Tom Price, we've been there for 6 years or something, the kids in Tom Price now know why the trains are in their town.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They didn't know that before.
Well, they weren't sure what
Yeah.
they were doing, what
Yeah.
the trains were doing, yeah. But this is working with primary kids. Now they know that there's a pit to the port scenario,
Yeah.
with the pit being full of iron
Yeah, wow.
going to Dampier.
Yeah. And isn't that, you just think about that, and that's quite a simple concept.
Yep.
But the kids not having that full understanding because no one's involved them. Right.
Yeah, so that you have to immerse them in the environment in which they live.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so whenever we go to our regional schools, it's always about getting to know their environment, what makes up the environment, what Earth spheres, how they interact, what's part of their environment, and then local employment pathways. That's ultimately where we're geared to, particularly towards the middle and upper high school too. And that's, again, not a separate subject. It's embedded in our learning model.
Yeah. That's so cool. So when it comes to life and work, what matters most to Suzy?
I live to work and work to live.
Yep.
I don't think I can separate the two. I haven't done that for 20 years since I started teaching. I have not been able to separate the two. It's experiential. My life is experiential.
Yeah.
Everything is like, even I take my husband to volcanoes, and
that's pretty cool.
And it's about learning.
Yeah.
Constantly learning and to gather ideas and materials to then use in classroom. Like, I went to Iceland for the first time in 2012, apparently to get over my second divorce. That ruined me. It was the biggest mistake in my life.
But we learn.
We learned. Mm-hmm. However, I remember going on the bus and looking at the volcanoes and thinking, I can replicate this using pancake batter. You know, like just to do investigations relevant with pseudo-volcanoes and stuff like that, you know, like. So everything is about learning. Yeah. Even if I go back to the same spot 35,000 times, like I have been to the pinnacles.
Well, that's pretty cool. I can understand why you go back there a fair bit.
Oh, yeah. But, yeah, it's mainly to, get the students to see that the significance of them.
Yeah.
But, even my three sons, every school holidays was, we've got to go this, got to do a dry run for this field trip. So, I pulled them along to different places to do a reconnaissance and dry run. So, look, there has been no distinction between. Well, my life is what I do, and that's what I think is really important when you work. You work most of your life, and it's best what you work at actually complements your life.
Yeah, that you actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
And believe in it.
Yeah.
So what do you consider then to be your biggest win, either professionally or personally? You're an award-winning educator. Like, you've got some pretty significant awards behind your name. But what do you think is the biggest win?
That's a huge one. I honestly think professionally my biggest buzz is when wherever I go in WA now, I bump into an alumni.
Wow.
That really lights my fire.
Yeah.
And whether I'm landing in Kalgoorlie or Paraburdoo or even walking down the streets of Leonora and I hear, "Hi, Herbie, how are you?" And I'm going, "Oh, yes, hello, how are you?" You know, I think that to me professionally has been my biggest achievement. So to see students who otherwise would not be in the industry are now in the industry.
Yeah.
Because they've had that awareness as they've gone through middle school and upper school of what is out there here in Western Australia in terms of career options and career advantages. So, yeah, that's definitely professionally my biggest achievement. Personally,
3 boys. That's pretty amazing. Boy mum energy is hardcore, so I take my hat off to you.
Oh, yeah, and having a third successful marriage.
Good things come in threes.
Yes,
eh?
yes. It has reinstated the value of marriage for me after my first 2, annihilations. I honestly did not believe in relationships after that until Simon came into my life.
Must be a good man. So I want to really ask you, what is one piece of advice you give your students that you hope they take away from your program, from your education?
Okay. Look through windows and walk through doors.
Oh, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's because you don't want to set limits on yourself.
Yeah.
Don't have expectations. Have goals. I'm not saying don't. Go with the flow. You've got the confidence, go with the flow
Yeah.
and see where it leads you.
Yeah, I love that. Because sometimes some of those doors you might not have even realised existed, but you give it a go and end up with something like stealing a podcast off someone for a day.
Yeah, you just, like if you don't walk through those doors and take those risks, you're not going to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
starting the foundation, I had to walk away from it, walk away from the safety of the education department. And look, 7 years down the track, 8 years down the track through the hard work of our volunteer board and our volunteers and what have you, we're still around.
Still fighting for...
Yeah, still fighting for equitable education and still fighting to modify, make sure that everyone has a good time learning.
Yeah.
About the earth.
Because then they'll be excited by it and then they'll have a career by it and we have a thriving industry in Australia. They're pretty big goals.
Yeah.
Right.
But, 40 years ago when I started in the industry, it was the same thing. Where was the skilled labour? Most of us that started in Telford at the same time I did were all Eastern Staters.
Yeah, okay.
There's only 2 Western Australians. So, look, that problem was there 40 years ago. And the problem, I'm so sick of talking about the problem.
Yeah.
There are solutions. And I have to say that our foundation is one solution. There are solutions. Back us. Give us a go. We've got wonderful sponsors who are believing in us, but we need more. We need more support.
So where can people go to find out more about the foundation and how they can support it?
www.corefoundation.com.au.
Awesome. Check it out. Support the Core Foundation. To wrap up, I'm going to ask you to look into the camera and give some advice to young up-and-coming professionals. How do you want to motivate them to take over the world, essentially?
Yeah, are you talking about graduates now?
Graduates, kids in school, anyone that we're trying to attract to the STEM industry, really.
You got to, back yourself and believe in who and what you are. I think that self-identity, that self-authentication is so important to developing where you want to be and where you want to go. Honestly, and sometimes that might take a few asteroid impacts and mass extinction events to get to that point, to actually strip you down to recognise and find out who and truly what you are. But honestly, I'll keep looking this way, yes. Honestly, that is, and as I said, look through windows and walk through doors. Walk through those doors, take those risks. By taking those risks, it leads you constantly will go somewhere. It'll lead you to a T. This risk will lead you to here, which will then lead you to another spot, to another spot, to another spot. Don't limit yourself by fear.
Wow. If that doesn't motivate you to take risks, take the leap, then I don't know what else will. Suzy, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed being able to chat with you. You've had a phenomenal career and you've walked through doors. You were a rock doctor that then moved across to education and trying to change how we educate young people to see the possibilities in a whole heap of different careers, which I think is so powerful. It's a lot more powerful than just inspiring someone by saying, study this, you'll be great at it. Get them to come up with what they're good at and where they're good at it and show them all those career possibilities. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
So thank you for tuning into another episode of the Gold Room podcast. If you like us, like and subscribe, write some comments down below. Tell us your experiences with STEM education as well, because I think it's really important that we learn and grow and inspire young people to these phenomenal careers in the WA industry. Until next time, see ya.